Now, organizational transformation begins with personal transformation of the leaders. The culture is a reflection of the leadership consciousness. So, who you are as a leader in an organization is reflected in the culture of the organization. And I've worked with many CEOs all over the world, and the ones that get it can transform their organizations very quickly because they transform themselves. They give up these solid beliefs about what they've learned in the past, and that's going to be what they want to do in the future. Because I always say this, beliefs divide and values unite.
We're joined today by the extraordinary Richard Barrett, who is a globally recognised thought leader in leadership, organisational and societal culture, and personal transformation. Richard Barrett is a globally recognised thought leader in leadership, organisational and societal culture and personal transformation. He is the president of the Barrett Academy for the Advancement of Human Values, the founder of the Barrett Values Centre, the leader of the Global Humanity Awareness Initiative, the developer of the Barrett Culture Analytics for Organisations, a fellow of the World Business Academy, and former values coordinator at the World Bank. He is one of the founders of the V20, an engagement group within the G20 ecosystem that promotes values-based decision-making at the national level. He is also the leader of the Barrett Academy Fellowship Programme. He has consulted on leadership, culture and values for large organisations worldwide. Hello, Richard. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited to get into our conversation.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it already.
Yeah, for the listeners, we might have had a little conversation about birthdays already, but I'll talk more about that in a minute.
A little conversation. It was quite a big conversation, as I recall.
That's because anyone who knows me will know I can't shut up. But we're not here to listen to me, though. We're here to listen to you. And I'm really, really interested in how all of this began, Richard. Take me back on a journey. What made you start sort of sparking this interest in your personal development? Because you have had a huge career transition, haven't you?
Yeah. My whole life has been a transformational journey. I think my soul was always active in my life. I just didn't know it for the first 30, 40 years, or 50 years. When I was at school, I thought I'd go to university, but nobody had ever been to university in our family. My father died when I was 17, and my mum and I had no money. My mum said, look, your father's wish that you go to university and you can get in, but we don't have any money. So if you can look after yourself, I'll look after myself. And I thought that was brilliant, actually. It wasn't until much, much later that I realized just how brilliant it was. And how much of a sacrifice, because I had to go away from home. My father just died. My mum was on her own. I didn't have any siblings. And that's what happened. And my mum took a job. She hadn't worked in her life, actually. Well, she had, but not while she was married. And she became the cleaner of the local Methodist chapel.
What a brave lady. It kind of makes a lot of sense there, right? Because all this transition requires quite a bit of courage. And that's where you get it from, right?
And so she took this job, and I got a full grant from in those days, the government paid for you to study. That's a lot ago. So I actually saved money out of my grant, and my mum, then I left and got a job, and I paid off my mum's mortgage very quickly, and it was amazing. And my mum lived to be 100, and she was maybe about 50 or 60 at that time when I went to university. So yeah, that was a tremendous sacrifice, and it just made me, because and then I realized that even though I graduated in civil engineering and transportation planning, actually what fascinated me was esoteric psychology, every type of question about the deep unknown. And I studied that for 30 or 40 years and got to self-actualize as a transportation engineer at the World Bank. And then suddenly became extremely bored with my career and knew that I had to stop doing that and do what I'd been thinking about for the 30 years. And that was working on personal and organizational transformation. And that's what I did. And that started 1997. So what's that? I don't know, nearly 30 years ago. And I never looked back after that. It was like amazing. It was like, what a journey. And that journey shifted in 2017 or 18. When the company I'd built up, the Barrett Values Centre, I decided to leave and set up a different company, which would focus on deep personal transformation, which is where I wanted to go, or where my soul wanted to go. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 6 or 7 years. And that's called the Barrett Academy. And basically, I'm on this amazing soul journey of deepening my understanding of what it means to be human. And it just keeps on going and going. And 3 years ago, I got a message from my soul. You can stop writing now. I'd written 15 books by that time. And you can start painting. So, all right, what am I going to paint now? I read that Kingdom. I'm going to paint portraits because I can paint emotions. And so I'm still into, the deep personal stuff, but now I'm going to paint it on people's faces, with people's faces.
This is fascinating because many people seem to think that you fall into one camp or the other. You're either an artistic, creative person, or you're a very scientific, empirical person. But it seems to me that you're both, right? Because you start off your career in a very data-driven, technical area. And then here you are, an artist 30 years later.
And a writer.
And a writer, yeah.
And so what I've learned is nobody has a soul. You are the soul. And your soul incarnates for 3 reasons: to self-express, connect, and contribute. So if you can get in touch with that self-expression, it all has to do with some form of creativity in terms of how you, not necessarily artistic or dancing or singing, but the creativity that and even my mum had, she became the flower arranger in this little chapel. And after she became the cleaner, and she was the most amazing flower arranger. And I remember at her funeral, I don't legend, but she lived to be 100. I mentioned at her funeral, I decided to have a casket, not one of the big wooden things, but a woodcut casket, so that you could weave flowers into the casket. And because she would love flowers. And here we were at the service, the funeral service, and somebody got up from the local chapel and said, "I always remember Mrs. Barrett. She taught me so many things about flower arranging." And she said, one of the things she taught me was, you have to leave a space between the flowers so a butterfly can get through. That induct me for an emotional 6, I tell you.
I was going to say, as if you weren't sad enough.
So anyhow, what I'm saying is that even my mom, who never had a passport, never left the country, never drove a car or anything, she had this self-expression, which turned out to be flower arranging. And that's all we need. The soul wants a form of self-expression. And my soul is pretty active in that area. Like, it gets on, it goes on and on and on. So now I've gone back to writing as well as painting. I've just written 2 books in the last 6 months. I've just created a whole new model on AI to analyze leaders, organizations, and the countries in terms of their worldviews. I just can't stop. The ideas just keep coming and coming, and I have to do something about them. Otherwise, I get.
Well, I want you to share some of those with us today, because my listeners, Richard, primarily are leaders themselves. So they will be CEOs, general counsel, chief ethics and compliance officers, sort of C-suite usually. And you've done so much work on leadership, and that's how I came to learn about your writing at first.
Right.
So thinking about those leaders, listening to that wonderful journey you've shared with us around kind of discovery, really, of what it is that your soul has been telling you, you say, for many years, but maybe it's about tuning into it, isn't it? And listening and acting on it. So how would I, as a leader, connect with that side now? And, what's it dependent on?
So I do quite a lot of public speaking, and off to Brazil in about 3 or 4 weeks, and I'll do about 10 speeches in about 15 days. And I speak to many leaders, and they want to know about this inner dimension because it's that you can't learn it in business school, you know, and they don't want to go to these, fuzzy wuzzy retreats. Let me put it that way, spiritual retreats. But when they encounter somebody like me with a reputation in that world, talking about these matters, they listen because they respect who I am and what I've achieved. And so I'm able to then say, well, look, it's really important as a leader. The first thing you have to do as a leader is know yourself. I wrote a book 11 years ago called The New Leadership Paradigm. And in that book, I talked about leading self, leading a team, leading an organization, and leading a society. You can't lead a team or an organization if you can't lead yourself. And that's the beginning, leading yourself. What does that mean? It means understanding your values. And of course, I'm very well known in that field, the values field, because invented the way of mapping values to measure culture. Knowing yourself is absolutely fundamental. And you talked before we met about a rabbit hole. Well, knowing yourself is absolutely going into a rabbit warren, actually. It's like, wow, you go down one, then you discover something new, and you go down another, and you begin this journey of self-discovery, which is amazing if you can let go of this idea about who you are. Professor Keegan called it the socialized mind, the self-authoring mind, and the self-transforming mind. The self-transforming mind is a mind that is able to look at itself and say, and look at other people and be open to change. Open to the change in the sense of becoming more of who you are and making a deeper connection with your soul, because that's who you are. As I said, you don't have a soul, you are the soul. And if you want to lead a fulfilling life, I don't care whether you're a businessman or politician, or if you want to lead a fulfilling life, you have to express what is in your soul.
And I think you've gone on to say, sort of on a deeper level as well, that the personal values of leaders of an organization potentially have more impact on the culture of that organization than any other factor.
Now, organizational transformation begins with personal transformation of the leaders. The culture is a reflection of the leadership consciousness. So who you are as a leader in an organization is reflected in the culture of the organization. And I've worked with many CEOs all over the world, and the ones that get it can transform their organizations very quickly because they transform themselves. They give up these solid beliefs about what they've learned in the past, and that's going to be what they want to do in the future. Because I always say this, beliefs divide and values unite. And we tend to make decisions based on our beliefs about what happened in the past. Well, what happened in the past is not what's going to happen in the future, because things are changing so quickly. So if you want to evolve and grow, then you need to embrace your values. And what are your values? These are the deeply held, not beliefs, but deeply held ideas about morality in a way, but more than morality, about how things should be. And those are expressed through your worldview. So understanding your worldview and understanding who you are makes you a very interesting leader in the sense that you become a role model for the people in your organization. And that means things like humility, authenticity. I mean, humility is an extremely strong value. It's not weak. It's strength. Authenticity is strength. And people admire that because deep inside, they know that they are souls, and they know that when they see this person demonstrating their self-knowledge through the way that they are being, that not only they admire that person, but they want to be like that person, they want to be close to that person, and it becomes like an energy attractor.
It's really interesting because I saw a statistic on this, I think it was Thomas Griffin, that said 59% of employees reported that they didn't see any leaders at their company that they aspire to be.
Yeah.
That's
Well, the
not very nice, is it? It's not a great
well,
statistic.
it's I don't know about not very nice, it's it's sad.
Yeah, absolutely, because it makes you feel a bit despairing, really, because given what you've just said about the importance of that role model in terms of the culture.
Well, but look at the global political situation. Do you see any leaders that you would want to be like? All of the big leaders in this world are ego-driven, and they are more than ego-driven, they're, nasty people. They put it like that.
And that maps back, doesn't it, to your whole concept about cultural entropy and having a toxic organization. Tell us a little bit about that, about how you've developed these tools to measure it.
Okay, so going back, 30 years ago when I left the World Bank and decided to stop, focusing on transportation and start focusing on transformation. Wasn't a big change in terms of the alphabet, but it was a big change in terms of how I showed up. At that time, I was writing my first book. It was called A Guide to Liberating Your Soul. You know, I thought I knew something about that. And then I hadn't finished that book. I was still at the World Bank before I started a new book called Liberating the Corporate Soul, where I took Maslow's model, expanded it and extended it, and made it into a model which could be used for mapping value so you could measure culture. Now, this became extremely popular. It's all over the world now. It's been used by millions of people. That idea that you can actually measure consciousness by mapping values to a model of 7 levels, which is based on Maslow, really took off. And that was, the start of my career in, or the start of my journey as a soul into self-expression. And what you do in the world sends out ripples. And we talked about this earlier. And you've no idea where all these ripples go. But you see, your ego is interested in where it goes and who you are. But when you're a soul, you don't care. You just do what you have to do and allow it to be. And then you find out later from people, wow, that changed my life, or this changed my life. There are about 3 or 4 of my books really resonate with people. And I later went on to do various versions of Liberating the Corporate Soul. And
Yeah, because I think it was a new psychology of human well-being that was talking a lot about that ego soul dynamic.
exactly, that is what I call a big book. It was like 300 pages of a new psychology of human well-being. And the inspiration for that was that Maslow said, I see on the horizon something really amazing that I can't stop myself from writing about. And what he was basically saying was that he was inventing the whole idea of self-actualization and self-realization and transcendence.
Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that will resonate with quite a few of the listeners, because you've got very definite ideas about what each of us are doing in a particular decade of our lives, or would like to be doing.
Yeah. Well, I call it the 7 stages of psychological development. And the first 3 stages are all about developing your ego, which fine, the ego is a brilliant thing. I don't know where I'd be without my ego. But the problem is the fears of the ego, the subconscious fears that undermine your development as a soul. And so to develop as a soul, you have to let go of fear. There has to be no fear and no subconscious fears, because, those subconscious fears creep up on you. I mean, have you ever been angry, Sarah?
Well, I wouldn't like to admit to it, but yes, quite a lot, actually.
Well, okay, well, there's a very simple reason for that, is it? Because you're not getting your needs met, right? And whatever you need is what you value. So there's an immediate link between values, needs, and emotions. All right. And so when you are getting your needs met, how do you feel?
Yes, obviously, I think one thing that will maybe resonate with quite a few of my female listeners, though, is that I find it quite difficult to consider my own needs because I'm a single parent and, I'm sorting out my daughter and my elderly parents and what have you. So,
So let's just talk about stages of development because this is what leads right into it. So the first three stages up to the age of 20, your brain is growing and developing, and the survival, and safety, and self-esteem. Those are the first three stages of development that coincide with the development of the brain. And then comes the individuation stage where you begin to let go of your cultural and parental conditioning because who you are by the early 20s is you've been molded into this person by your parents and by the culture you're brought up in. So if you were brought up in China, you would have a particular. If you're brought up with loving parents, if you were brought up by not loving parents. So by the time you're early 20s, you are basically you aren't yourself.
you're the product of your upbringing at this point then.
Yeah, exactly. Cultural and personal upbringing. And so individuation is the fourth stage of development, which is where you begin to let go of all these fear-based beliefs that have formed you and all of these ideas and beliefs of other people and said, who am I? Who am I at the deepest level? And that's when you begin to discover your values. And and then you realize that your values are probably quite different from your parents' values or from the culture in which you were raised, or maybe not. Maybe you like the culture in which we were raised. Anyhow, you go into that individuation stage, and that's usually in the late 20s and 30s. And then in the 40s, you move out of that individuating because you find it beginning to find out who you are. And you move into this next stage where of self-expression, I feel like, where you begin to connect with your soul and say, well, what brings meaning and purpose to my life? What is it that I love to do that brings me joy? And what you love to do that brings you joy, if there's joy involved, it means that the soul is happy. If there's happiness involved, it means the ego is happy. Now, happiness is the shortest lasting emotion there is because, okay, so let's say I'm 18 years old and I don't have a driving license and I go and pass my test and I'm happy for a whole 24 hours.
Maybe not even that long, actually.
Yeah, happiness is such a short emotion, but joy goes on for ages because it's actually you're fulfilling your soul's destiny through joy. So what brings you joy? That's the question. And then what brings you joy is the question. And then the other question is, well, what fears are stopping me from finding that joy and self-expressing? And that's the crux of the 40s, and now you talked about female listeners and people like yourself who are maybe you're 20 or 30. I don't know how old you are. Maybe you're 40.
Oh, of course I am 30. No, let's not go into how old I am now. I'm definitely older than 30.
Anyhow, look, here's the point, particularly for female listeners. If you don't self-express, there's a good chance you'll get thyroid problems and breast cancer because it's the fifth chakra. It's this chakra up here. And that is the stage of self-expression. And as you pointed out, women they often have a partner, they have children, and they've got aging parents. And who comes last?
Me.
And you're denying the self-expression of the soul. And see, the mind has an amazing impact on the body. When you deny your self-expression, you deny who you are.
And I think an awful lot of listeners, male or female, would definitely rank their role as well above themselves, their obligations in their role, their responsibilities. And I think I hear that a lot. They want to do well, they want to be good leaders. But it sounds like what you're saying is in order to be good leaders, they actually need to do a lot of work on listening to their soul and actually connecting with this self-actualization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You cannot sacrifice your life for others. Now, I don't mean, don't get me wrong. It means that you have to pay attention to yourself, love yourself, and love others. And so the more, as much as you can love yourself, you'll be able to love others as well. But do not deny yourself. You know, I was 52 when I left the World Bank. I was at the top of my game as a transportation engineer. I traveled the world, talking to governments about their urban transport problems. And then I suddenly realized I was bored with that, and I had to become a transformation engineer, not a transportation engineer.
You must have been at 52, you must have been giving up a lot at that stage, Richard. I mean,
Exactly. That's what my friends said at the World Bank. They said, look, another 10 years, you'll have a 6-figure tax-free income. What the hell are you thinking about? And more than that, you're going to do something. Nobody knows, and nobody's ever heard of you. You don't have a reputation. You're a disaster. And I said, maybe, but I have to do this. This is something I have to do because I was listening to my soul. This is what my soul was telling me to do. What its form of self-expression would be. And so I left. Fortunately, I left with a year's salary, which helped me get started. And I never looked back. I mean, that 6-figure tax-free pension, don't worry about it. Just get on and live what is inside you and be in the world and bring whatever's inside you. It doesn't matter what it is. See, for my mom, bless her soul, what was inside her was cleaning the chapel and arranging flowers. And she brought joy to everybody who had a wedding or a funeral in that little chapel. They said, we want Mrs. Barrett to organize the flowers.
and that in turn brought her joy.
Yes, exactly.
Arguably why she lived till 100, right?
Exactly. You got it. You got it. And she learned this. She bought books and she studied it. I mean, I'd never seen her buying a book ever, but she bought books and studied. And so that was her mode of self-expression. And so when you can find there was this mode of self-expression, it brings joy to the soul and see the energy of the soul. You have a physical body, but you have an energetic body. And that energetic body is really your soul's body. And when that energetic body is fully realized, you will be in good health. On Friday, I'm going to be 80 years old. Do I look like I'm 80? No. Nobody says I look like 80, and nobody says I act like 80, and I don't. Well, my body has aches and pains, I feel it now and again, but you see, you bring the universal life force through.
Oh, the passion emanates from you. It does.
Yeah. You bring it through and put it out into the world. And that's the meaning of abundance, by the way, is when you're able to bring it through and push it out. Abundance is flow. It's not accumulation. People think about abundance as accumulation. It's not. It's flow. The more you put out into the world, the more you get to put in.
Is this linked at all to the sort of whole system of change that you talk about sometimes? Or have I got the wrong end of the stick there?
I don't know. Tell me more. It sounds interesting.
No, it's you're thinking about, I think, organisational transformation when you say about the leader's role in facilitating it, but it's the whole system, which I assume means the leaders, the employees, as well as the organisational part.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when, and you mentioned something earlier I didn't pick up on, but when you measure the values of the organization by asking employees what their values are, what values they see in the organization, and what values you'd like to see, in that middle question about what value, they get to pick value which are positive and potentially limiting. So, for example, positive value would be creativity or innovation. And a potentially limiting value would be bureaucracy, hierarchy. And so when you get all the results back and you look at the proportion of votes for those limiting values, that is what's called cultural entropy. It's the degree of fear in the organization created by the leaders' behaviors. And we can measure that. It's really easy to measure. And so, sometimes when I've worked with many very large organizations, the first year they may have cultural entropy at 20-25%, which is quite high, but not toxic. And then 10 years later, they've got their entropy down to 10%. Well, that's amazing, because what they're saying is there's so much less fear in the organization and so much more, dare I say the word, love or concern or caring, that everybody feels that their needs are being met in the organization.
So talk to us a little bit about that, because I think measuring it gives us a gauge of where we're at. But anyone who's done a survey will know that the real magic is when you actually enact things that improve whatever those results are. So what sorts of things can organizations do to improve those results?
Well, and first of all, you do the cultural values survey, and it's a baseline measure with a level of cultural entropy, the degree of dysfunction in the organization caused by the leaders and their beliefs. Okay. So you then start a journey of cultural transformation. Now, that is not something that you can delegate as a leader. You have to be part of that, because the culture is a reflection of your consciousness and the consciousness of your other leaders in the organization. One of the first things you can do is build this thing I invented called a trust matrix. You sit around with all your leaders and organize how do you call that? I guess, a system of value, 12 values that divided into various types. And you say to the people in that leadership team, which of these values do you see in our organization? Which of these values would you like to see in our organization? And you immediately get feedback within 2 hours as to what you're good at and what you're not good at as a group of people. And because the idea is, if you can build trust, as I call it the trust matrix, if you can build trust, you will have a high-performing organization, because that means that things will work very smoothly in the organization. And so the trust matrix is a great way of analyzing in 2 hours how your leadership team is doing. And that exercise is in my book, The Values-Driven Organization. And it's used quite a lot, actually, as a quick way of judging or determining what you might need to do. And alongside that, you've got the results of the values assessment. And you can see what your level of cultural entropy is. And you can see, when you put these together, you ended on a map for going forward. Well, what that map includes is the personal transformation of the leaders. And there is in those workshops where you find out what beliefs you have, what fear-based beliefs you have, which are holding you back and holding the organization back. And overcoming those fear-based beliefs is how you move forward. And you can watch the cultural entropy go down year after year if you would actually do that. I've done it so many times.
Because I was going to ask you, I think it's in, sorry, you've written so many books, I might be confused, but I think it was Love, Fear and Destiny of Nations that you said that fear-based decision making keeps us locked in the lower levels of consciousness, preventing both personal and organizational growth.
we've got a better example of that in the USA right now.
Yes.
Donald Trump thinks he's going to make America great again. He's doing everything that will end up in the opposite direction, because running a nation is like running an organization. He is disseminating fear in every corner, not only of the people in his country, but all his suppliers, all the other people, all other nations in the world. Nobody's going to trust him anymore. He's going to make America the worst country to live in, and he can't even see it.
Well, you've also said, and this linked with what you've just said is even more worrying, that the future of humanity depends on our ability to collectively raise our level of consciousness.
Absolutely. And right now it's going down.
Exactly, given what you've just said and what we've all observed. So, I mean, I'm kind of jumping to a question I was going to ask you more towards the end of our conversation, but I think it naturally falls here, is where's this going? Where do you see the future of leadership?
All right. So let's split it out from politics and the social dimension and the business
because we want to be able to relate it back to our own organisations as well as leaders. So that's a good idea. Strip the politics out.
I have great hope for our organizations because we're not, like, we can avoid being contaminated by all this fear that's going on at the political level. And so when leaders are able to self-actualize and then self-realize, they create organizations that thrive. And they implement, and this is one of my big important points, is they teach the people in the organization how to understand themselves. Now, many organizations have a budget for leadership development. And this money goes to what I call the precious few. Those people who've been picked out as future leaders. I think that's completely wrong. What you should do, maybe some of the money goes, but a lot of the money should go to helping the people in the organization grow and develop so that everybody in the organization has an opportunity to go through this process of individuation and self-actualization. And they will love you for it because it'll change their lives. And the leaders will spring up from these trainings because people want to grow and develop. They want to be better versions of themselves. And so spending all that money on the precious few is a waste of time because then generally these people go off and leave anyhow. And so spending that money on the masses inside the organization, helping everybody to grow and develop, and it doesn't have to be that expensive, is a way of making sure that you carry the whole organization forward in a values-driven way.
Just thinking practically, just going to push you on this because I think I can imagine my listeners hanging on to every word here. What can they do if money is tight, if there's a limited budget, which I'm hearing more and more is the case, particularly in terms of reinvestment in this sort of cultural work that most companies obviously are alive to the fact they need to do, but they're trying to do it on a budget. What single thing can leaders do to contribute to elevating that collective consciousness?
Well, this is going to sound awfully self-serving, but I've thought about this problem a lot. So in the last few years, I've developed 18 e-learning courses, which cost practically nothing. It's like £50 a course per person. I mean, and 18 of these courses, and you can actually pick out the ones you want to develop a program for your employees. And you don't have to force them to do it. They can say, yeah, I'd like to do that. And it's not expensive. But if you were to do this in, the normal, formal way, where you bring in consultants and they run through these big exercises that go on for 2 years and involve everybody and cost £5 million. And we know all the companies that do that. That's a waste of time and money, in my opinion, because first of all, you're forcing people to go through this, and secondly, you want to focus on the people who are wanting to learn and giving them the opportunity, and you can do that. If you go to my website, you'll see these courses like £50 a time.
I'll put a note in the description with the link for people.
Yeah. Hey, whatever. But I didn't intend to get into this self-serving thing. It doesn't matter. My point is this: your people grow and develop is what it's all about. And that's another thing that Professor Keegan talked about is is about developing your people is fundamentally important to creating a great company, because you see, as the people grow and develop, they feel better about themselves. Not only do they feel better about themselves, they feel better about the company they're working in, because that company allowed them to feel better about themselves.
And how does purpose interplay into this? Being a purpose-driven.
Okay, so purpose is a very funny term. I've thought about it and worked with it a lot. So the ego God bless the ego, wants to have a purpose. I'm going to have a purpose. My purpose is to change the world or to do this or that. Well, what they're really talking about is their soul self-expression. That's what purpose is. It's like, how do I express what is deeply inside of me and is my unique self, my unique abilities? And that, if you like, should be your purpose. But I don't like calling it purpose, because it's self-expression. It's about who am I and what do I want to bring to the world. I know you can translate that into the word purpose, but that just like, it's like an ego word. He's like, I've got this purpose, and I really want to bring peace to the whole world. And that's when I go, I want to save the planet. Forget, that's not really, you're not going to do that on your own. But there's nothing to stop you from actually saying, within me is this deep desire to do this, which contributes to that. And I think that's tapping into that desire. This last 2 weeks, I've tapped into that desire. I have vlogged on LinkedIn. I've had 27,000 views this last 7 days because my soul told me to put some sense into what's going on between Putin, Trump, and Zelensky. And so I used my model of worldviews to analyze these people. What did I find? I found that Trump and Putin have exactly the same worldview, and it's a low consciousness, and they admire each other, and they like each other. Why? Because they've got the same worldview. This last 2 weeks, that became my purpose. My self-expression was to use this model that I'd created to bring understanding to the world so people could see that, Trump is not going to make it.
Because it does, his worldview, for want of a better phrase, does seem to fly in the face of everything you say about, well-being over wealth, collaboration over competition, long-term impact over short-term gains. I mean, it's literally the opposite of what you advocate after all your research.
Absolutely. That's why he's never going to make America great again, because it's not going to happen. I just read a great article today about negotiating skills, and I can't remember exactly, but there's 2 types of negotiating. So there's one where there's winners and losers, and there's one negotiation where everybody wins. Now, he only uses negotiating skill where there's winners and losers because he wants to be a winner because he has such a weak ego. And that means that people next time won't play games with him. They won't involve him. We're not going to go there because he sees negotiation as winning and losing. Whereas we see negotiation as everybody's a winner.
So just on this point, what do you foresee in terms of leadership paradigms then over this next, decade or so? What's...
Are we talking about political or
Yeah,
business?
well, I think that you can't separate the two in many ways, can you?
Well, you can, because you see, in the political domain, you're either a democracy or you're not a democracy, and there are many graduations of democracy. I mean, right now, according to Economic Intelligence Unit, America is a flawed democracy.
Okay.
It's not a full democracy at all, and it's heading south. It's heading in the wrong direction. It's becoming less and less of a democracy. And then at the end of that scale, are people like the people who run China or Russia and North Korea. No democracy whatsoever. It's what the leader wants and gets through fear. Now the other end of that scale is what the Scandinavians. They've figured it all out. The Norwegians, the Swedes, the Finns, the Icelandic people, the Danish, they figured it all out.
You've done a lot of research with the Nordics as well, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I figured out why are these nations so ahead of the game. Well, it's because in 1850, some of the wise people there saw the fact that industrialization was coming, and everybody at that time worked on the land. And they said, our people are not ready for this. So we have to teach them basically individuation principles. And that's what they did for 100 years, right up to the end of the Second World War. And so all of these people were then instilled with this idea that the collective is more important than the individual, not in a communistic sense, but in a shared wealth sense. So people in these countries, they enjoy paying taxes. Why? Because they know they're going to benefit, their children are going to benefit, their neighbors are going to benefit, everybody, they've got this collective well-being, worldview. And, and that's the opposite of the ego's fears. And so we have a model, that's where we can go. And I've gone beyond that in my humanity awareness initiative.org, where I'm putting out, you can go there and you can find many of these courses I've talked about who are actually free. Humanity awareness initiative.org. Because, and in Brazil, there's now a humanity awareness initiative team working on how to transform Brazil. Well, they did it in these Nordic countries. Why can't we do it in other countries? And Brazilians have said, yeah, we want to do that. And so there's a team of 10 or 16 people who have just got started last year and building the Humanity Awareness Initiative, which is a higher order worldview, which goes even beyond where the Scandinavians have got to. And I call where the Scandinavians are people awareness, because they are very much focused on people. But beyond that, you have to focus on humanity. It's a higher level consciousness. And so all my work is towards move everything towards in that direction.
Well, and on that, you've done so much work that's going to impact and has already impacted on organisations, on nations, as you've just described. Reflecting on your journey, and I know you're a progressive, forward-thinking optimist, so you're always looking forward and you don't like particularly looking back. But I think I'd really like to know, is there anything that you would really hope to leave in terms of a legacy, either in leadership or organisational transformation? What would you really be happy with?
Okay. Well, now you're speaking to my ego, of course. However, I have thought about that. And if you go to my website, barrettacademy.com, you'll find my legacy project. And my legacy project, I decided to do it 2 years ago, is 18 e-learning courses and 18 30-minute videos, one for each of the courses. And I thought, well, I've done so much. If I was to pop off next week, what would be left? I thought, well, no, I can actually, everything I've written about, I can bring together in these 18 courses, the leading self, leading a team, leading an organization, personal transformation, societal transformation. It's all there. And so I tick that box. The funny thing is I'm now going beyond that box.
I was going to say, you've already sort of pole vaulted over that, though, and the work that you...
Yeah, well, but I had to get that behind me, because I'm now doing something different. I'm now rethinking Maslow and Keegan, and etc. And so I've come to, I'm writing a new book, nearly finished. It's with the editor right now. It's called Feeling Your Way to Enlightenment. The idea in this book is that our emotions create feelings. And when you question your feelings, you find out just how much out of alignment or in alignment you are with your soul. And it's like homeostasis. It's like when your body is not in alignment with the DNA plan for your body, you will feel pain. And that pain is very instructive, because it tells you exactly where you have to look in order to correct the situation. Now, that's the same. What I realize is that's the same with our feelings. When you examine your feelings, they'll tell you exactly how you are in alignment and how you are allowed to alignment with your soul. And that's what this new book is.
What about people who might struggle to connect their feelings with their thoughts? I think that's something that...
So that's in the book. There are questions that you ask yourself. Okay, so give me an example of when you're not been feeling too good lately?
Well, my dog passed away last week, and that was really very sad. Is that a good example? She was only 5, and I took a bit of a hit on that because I wasn't expecting it.
Okay, so that's a very genuine feeling of grief. Okay, so I ask you, where is that feeling coming from?
Loss,
Loss.
yeah, it's because something, in this case, a loved family pet's been in my life daily for the past 5 years and it's been a source of joy, and now it's no longer there.
What attitude could you adopt that would make it be okay?
Well, I think I've already sort of been trying to adjust my mind frame about it, because obviously you could focus on the loss and, "Oh, it's all very sad,"
Yeah,
but
exactly.
also if you spin it on its head, that's 5 years of a pretty amazing dog in my life that I probably, may not have come across in another animal, or maybe, so I feel like I've already processed this quite a bit because I can see the positive that it's brought, right?
So, exactly. So when you get into painful experience, often there's a very positive side when you look at it deeply. And so, you could mitigate the grief up to a point by saying, you could mitigate by then saying, well, what, what, what brought me joy? What am I grateful for? What was the name of your dog?
Lily.
Lily. Well, so what did Lily bring to my life that is enduring? What did Lily teach me? Um, am I grateful for that? And then you could say, well, Lily was a little soul in my life that came to bring me joy and has now passed on into a different. And so Lily is still alive in my memory because I can remember all of those brilliant things this dog brought to me.
And you can apply that to most scenarios.
We can apply it to just about any scenario. You get to get down to the source of your feeling. What is the source of your feeling? Okay, loss. Loss. So Lily's passed on to. You have to have a different belief system that says Lily's passed on to his. She's a little soul, and she's moved on, and souls reincarnate, and so Lily's going to bring joy to
Mm.
somebody else sometime.
Like A Dog's Purpose, anyone who's seen that film, very, very good.
And all I'm saying is that when you examine your feelings, you can, even the sad feelings or whatever your feelings you've got, you can explore them in greater depth and learn things about who you are. And that's what this book is about. It's about, I call it feeling your way to transcendence.
Because I'm rarely envious, but I definitely get a sense of, I'm quite envious of your positive energy, that you just seem so motivated. And what did you say? I think you said you're teetering on 80, and you just got so much energy and positivity and zest for the next thing. What's the secret sauce, Richard? What can we?
I don't have that. My soul has that energy. You see, your soul stands midway between this material world and this universal energy field that science knows all about. Einstein knew all about it. This this energy field of love, and you are here, and the material world is down here, and the ego is down here, and the ego is a very fearful of this material world. And I don't live in this material world. I live in the energetic world in my soul. See, I see only. You see, when I walk down the street and there's a man cleaning the gutter, the street, I stop and I talk to this man and I say, "Wow, you're doing a really good job. This street looks so clean." I did 2 or 3 things right there. First of all, I connected. So the soul comes to self-express, connect, and contribute. So I connected with this person. And not only that, I made this person feel really good because he'd been recognized through the work that he's doing. I did it today, actually. I just did it. I do it almost every other day when I see the street cleaner or anybody doing any task that is for the community.
And I suppose that sort of circles back to your mum, doesn't it, really? Because how much value people saw in all the things that she did for the church. That stayed with you.
Yes, you see, you don't have to save the world. You just have to express your connection. And so when you begin to transcend this material world and move to the energetic world, everything changes. And so you align your ego motivation with your soul. That's when you begin to find joy. But then comes the next step, which is the step I'm now working on personally. You begin to then transcend the soul to become one with everything. It's like the what was it, the Pope was in New York and he went to this hot dog vendor, and the hot dog vendor said, well, what do you want? He said, make me one with everything.
Brilliant. I think I haven't read Soul Centered Living.
Oh, well, I finished that book just a few months ago, and this other book I'm working on goes even further.
And they are actual focusing on that, because I'm also thinking, just again, circling back to my leaders who'll be listening, that kind of connection that you made with a guy sweeping the street or whatever, that you try and do every day or every other day, that's something as leaders that would be so valued, I think. If I think of myself as an employee.
Yeah, imagine they did that with their employee. They walk into the building and there's somebody cleaning the floors. What do they do? Do they just walk by, or do they stop and say, wow, our building looks so great because of what you do?
100%, I can see.
That is like amazing.
And that loops back to the values that you were talking about right at the very beginning of our conversation, right?
Absolutely. And not only do the person affected, but the people watching you are affected.
So, unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our time together. I feel like we've just scraped the surface here. But there's one question I've asked everyone who's joined me on the podcast, and I'd like to ask you, if I may. If you could create a leader's survival kit, what would you put in it? Mm-hmm.
Leader's survival kit?
Yeah, what would you put in your leader's survival kit if you were putting it together?
Care for your children.
Oh, that's a really good one. Yeah, on so many levels.
Care for your children. Because they, when you care for them, they will then become the citizens which will create a new world. And, loving your children is about the most important thing you can do.
Wow, what a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much for your time, Richard. It's been such a pleasure. And so much for our listeners to digest. I'm sure we'll have to ask you back. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun.
That's it for today's episode of Insights from the Coalface, Elevating Leadership Beyond the Boardroom. I hope this conversation left you with fresh insights, new perspectives, and a deeper connection to the challenges and opportunities of leadership. If you found value in today's discussion, I'd love for you to share it with your network, leave a review, or reach out to me with your thoughts. Leadership can be a lonely road, but it doesn't have to be. Let's keep learning, growing, and supporting each other. Until next time, stay resilient, stay authentic, and keep leading with purpose.